And really, to tell you the truth, and to get deep here, the whole them walking around without any clothes, I mean, that was... some people look at that as, well, because they were innocent and all that. No, that's not. It was... There were things that were in the Old Testament that were a symbol. They meant something. And what it meant was there was nothing blocking them from God. They didn't have to cover themselves up. They didn't have to hide themselves. There was nothing, that kept them from, from their communion with God. It was perfect communion without nothing separating. That was the symbol there, and that's what God wants from us. You guys understand me? Still with me? Mm-hmm. All right, good. Now, go ahead and turn into Deuteronomy 30. Make sure I covered all this. God made the Garden of Eden beautiful. We read that last week. God made it to where it was pleasing in the sight. And the amazing thing was, God gave man a purpose in that garden. He said specifically, and there was no question in Adam's mind what he was supposed to do in that garden. And that's why when people say, well, all he did is eat a fruit. No, that's not all he did. He didn't just choose to eat an apple, That wasn't what Adam did. That wasn't the sin of Adam. The sin of Adam was not just eating some fruit. The sin was disobeying God. The sin was not standing up against the devil when he came into that garden and tempted Eve. You see what I'm saying? That was the sin. The sin was he was supposed to protect that garden and cause it to grow. That was his job, to protect the garden, to keep the devil out of that garden when he came in there. He did not have a right to come in there and do the things he did. And Adam didn't do it. The funny thing was, when Eve ate the fruit, that wasn't the sin. The sin wasn't Eve eating it. It was when Adam ate it. Because Adam could have slapped that fruit out of her hand and said, woman, don't touch that thing. And if he would have found out what happened, if she would have said, I talked to this thing over here, and this, this thing told me that if I eat this fruit, I'm going to be smart, he could have said, no, we know everything we need to know. If we don't need to know something else, we can ask God. Don't listen to that. So when you read this, see, man was given this divine choice to have faith that God had given him everything he needed, or to live in fear that there was something else that he was missing. You see, that is one of the reasons why he chose to eat this. Because, you see, the devil told Eve, said, this, it'll make you like gods. You'll know good from evil. There's something you don't know here. There's something you're missing. And so when Adam ate this fruit, it was that fear that there was something lacking in his life, which there wasn't. There wasn't anything lacking. But see, the Eden blessing is based upon faith, whereas the world system is based upon fear. And the interesting thing is that when you find out when they sinned, and we read this last week, that the curse was not God cursing them for eating the fruit. He said that the earth is cursed because of you. Adam caused the curse, not God. When Adam chose to go against God, the curse was there. The curse is inherent in sin, and I want you to hear me on this, all right? When you walk outside of the Eden blessing and you do things on your own, the curse is inherent in a sinful life. A curse is inherent in those things. It's not God cursing you. It's you walking outside of God's boundaries, outside of God's protection, and opening yourself up for that. We were talking about, it's so... When people go outside of the boundary that God made, and that's a good example is, with the whole big rising, with pornography and all this stuff going on, there are boundaries that God puts in our life for a reason. It's amazing that he even said this in Matthew. He said, these Pharisees run around going, we're not committing adultery, we're living by that commandment. He goes, well, if you look at a woman lustfully, you've already done it in your heart. Because, see, God was placing boundaries, a boundary. Garden of Eden had boundaries. The blessing had a boundary. If you stayed inside of that boundary, everything was going to be good. And if you worked inside of that boundary, everything would have been better than what you'd have on the outside. And that's a good example is people go outside of those boundaries, that God has placed, and they open themselves up to the curse. Next thing you know, the funny thing is, I like how Paul said it. He goes, when sin came into my life, there were things that I never thought about, temptation I never had that now I have. Next thing you know, you're running after things you thought you'd never run after. Next thing you know, your life starts falling apart. Why? It's inherent in the curse. It's sin. When you miss God's mark and you're not doing God's perfect will, the curse is inherent in sin. That's what happened here in the garden. When man chose to do it his way, when man got selfish and thought he can do it his way and got outside of the Eden blessing, the curse was there. The Eden system is based upon faith. The world system is based upon fear. And I want you to think about this for a second. What is the big thing that you hear constantly, all the time anymore in the news? People losing their jobs. Oh, people getting laid off. The world system is a fear-based system because everything has to do with, I got to work hard, I got to work hard, I got to work hard because I don't have a clue where I'm going to get my next meal. That's that thought. Oh, if I don't have work, then I can't eat. That's a fear-based system. I'm not going to go into what I did last week, but that's exactly what I was talking about last week with the way the system started. It was based upon confusion, upon fear, the world system. The Eden system is based upon faith. You get to decide which one you want to live in. Now, this is what I want to get to here that I didn't get into last week. I just want to do a quick review. I'm going to give you 3 points. You don't want to live in the world system. You want to live in this Eden system. It's time to change your address, all right? So here's the 3 things that you need to do. Number 1, the first thing you have to understand is if you're in Deuteronomy 30, I'm going to start in verse 14. Let me read this real quick. You guys still with me? You getting this? All right. Now, I want to say this too because I wrote this down to remind myself not to forget this. Sin will not keep you from God's will any more than you will let it. Just like anything else in your life, you can be victorious over sin. And when you screw up and you fail and you do something wrong, you could do exactly what 1 John 1:9 says and confess it, get it over with, and go on. Or you can live in it. That's your choice. You can go to God and say, God, I messed up. I need some help in this situation in my life. Please help me. I'm messing up. I'm failing here. God, I'm confessing this sin to you. Now I'm looking to you to change me from the inside, and go on. Sin will not defeat you unless you let it defeat you. When I say that the curse is inherent in sin, what I'm saying is when you live outside of the garden, I'm not talking just screwing up. When you screw up, you fail, you walk outside thinking there's something good, just throw that fruit down, get back in the garden, Take that apple and throw it outside, don't eat it. Get back in the garden system, get back in the Eden system. And then you're not going to walk in the curse. It's the people who sin and live there. And there are probably churches that are full of people that are living there. Because every single service, all you hear about is sin. I heard this guy say it because, it's kind of interesting. You can figure out what's going on in a church by listening to what the pastor preaches about the most. The sin of this or the sin of that or sin of this and that. That's all they talk about over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, no. God never meant for us to live in that place. God meant for us to live in the Eden blessing. We are not the sinners trying to get saved. We're the saved. Yeah, we might screw up, but that doesn't change us. We need to go back to what we are. I think I said it a few weeks ago. You got to understand that you are not what you do. Who you are is a lot bigger than that. And it's not until you let that become. An adulterer, somebody who commits adultery, is an adulterer because they live in that. And for them to get to the point to where they cheat on their wife, they've been living in that for a while. Somebody doesn't just get up one morning and say, I'm going to cheat on my wife, or cheat on my husband. They don't just get up one morning and do it. It's where they've been living inside of them. Somebody that kills somebody, they don't just get up one morning and decide to kill somebody. It's what's been living inside of them. You see, and that's what I understand. That's when you live outside of Eden blessing and you live in sin, it's what's going on inside of you. That's where you start to become something that you're not. And that's where you start living in the curse. And people like that, hey, they might go to heaven, but they're going to die a lot earlier than they were supposed to because they're living outside of the garden. They're living outside of the protection, outside of the boundaries, outside of what God has placed. And I've preached on this before. The reason why it's so important we watch the words we say, that's a boundary that God put in our life, that we can't walk around saying anything we want to say and expect God's blessing in our life. We can't go around and be selfish and expect God to bless us. We can't go around, bad-mouthing other people and expect us to have peace in our mind. We can't do those. Those are boundaries. There are churches right now that are full of people that all they do is live on gossip and rumors. They're not going to be blessed. A lot of them might die early because of that. It's because you can't run your mouth like that and expect God's blessing in your life. You've got to speak words of life. You've got to speak words of faith. You've got to walk in the Garden of Eden. You can't walk outside of it and expect God's blessing.